I was asked to talk about this and wasn't sure what I was going to talk about until something occurred to me that was rather disturbing. I mean, and I think about my career, I couldn't imagine in the early days doing the same thing for 20 years. I mean, I think we're like that a lot in our younger days. We think about the idea of doing the same job for 20 years, and we have this image of somebody sitting on an assembly line cranking away at the same bolt or the same nut on the same line of Buicks as they come past, day in, day out, year in, year out. No life for a lively, intelligent person of wit and substance and ability, right? And then one day I looked at the calendar and I realized I've been working at the Boston Globe for 20 years. What went wrong? Actually, nothing went wrong. Nothing at all. You see, I cover computers, the internet, digital technology, and I've done it now at the Boston Globe for 2 decades. And I suddenly realized that this is one of the greatest opportunities, one of the greatest chances that anyone could have. I've gotten to write for one of the great newspapers of this country and for one of the great newspaper audiences in this country. And I've been able to take them with me as I travel on this journey to try to understand one of the most dynamic, exciting, influential industries the world has ever seen. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor. And I got to admit also it's been a bit of a miracle when you think about it. I mean, just the fact that I do it for a daily newspaper. Just an interesting statistic that, I don't know, it might not bother you, but it sure bothers the heck out of me. Since 1990, the number of full-time workers in the newspaper business in this country has dropped 42%. We're a shrinking, declining industry, and somebody who can stay at a newspaper for 20 years must be doing something right. And I like to think that I have. I think what I've done right is a sort of a melding of the job I do and the personality that I have, because I cover an industry that's so dynamic, ever-changing, ever-morphing. And I'm the kind of person who loves that. And as a result, I realized that I haven't had the same job for 20 years. In fact, the job has changed time and time and time again over that entire period, which is why I have been able to do it with a sense of not just peace and enjoyment, but also with this gusto and this fervor and this always leaning forward for the next big thing, which inevitably comes. And the message I guess I want to convey to you guys is that you should be doing the same with whatever your chosen path in life is. You must figure out how to transition what you do, the beat that you have, just as a journalist has a beat. Everything you do is a beat that you must learn to transition, to morph, to change as the world you're working in changes. I'm good at that, and that's why I've been able to keep doing the same thing for 20 years, loving every minute of it. The whole thing actually began slightly before I came to Boston. I was a reporter at the Detroit Free Press. Yes, an amazing place, Detroit. I mean, the smoke's still rising from it. It's an amazing place of, it's just a crash, a frightening, wondrous place. But down the road in Illinois, at the University of Illinois, back in 1994, somebody invented a fascinating invention that I learned about way off in the hinterlands of Detroit called Mosaic. Now, those of you who are fairly young won't even know what I'm talking about. But Mosaic was actually the first halfway practical web browser. And it took forever for me to get it to work on a computer. I mean, it took days, because the computers of that era, you could barely run anything. People forget, this is when the era of like Windows 3.1 and Windows 95, the software for connecting the internet didn't even exist in those operating systems. You had to go get not only a browser, but a whole set of networking software and figure out how to install it. It took days. But once I did, and I turned that browser on and those pictures started to appear, it was one of those moments when you realized the world just changed. You looked at that and you knew this was going to be one of the most important things that had ever happened. I went back to my editors. I was covering banking at the time. I said, forget it, I want to cover this. And they agreed. They saw what I saw. And so I started covering computers and the internet, first there, and then in 1995, I arrived in Boston at the Boston Globe, and you couldn't have asked for a better place. Half the stuff I was writing about was invented around here. Amazing stuff, like some of the basic technologies of the internet, a lot of the basic technologies of computing and software engineering. It's just a wonderful place. Plus, there was the rise of these new companies that were starting to turn the internet into a commercial enterprise. 1995 is actually when that started to happen. It was the year that the internet was finally privatized, taken out of government control. It was the year that you saw companies like Netscape, the first great browser company, started. Craigslist started that year. Even Amazon started that year. So all these things were just getting started. And I realized that I had a chance to document the rise of an entire new American and global industry. And that's what I got to do. It was wondrous, it was delightful, it was exciting, and then everything changed. Around 2001, everything starts to fall apart. It was what we now know of as the dot-com bust. All these companies, you have to remember, in this period, there were companies where some guy came up with something like, I know, let's sell people dog food over the internet. And overnight, they were worth hundreds of millions of dollars. It was one of the most extraordinary technology bubbles of all time, and around 2001, it all began to fade and burst. And suddenly I realized the whole world had changed. Now I had to start to explain to people, what was the difference between a real business and a fake business? What happens when huge stock market valuations collapse and venture capitalists pull back? How does that affect the technology that they are going to be using every day? And so my beat becomes the documentation of an economic, well, almost tragedy, but also that of the survivors. Unfortunately, all too many of those survivors were the ones out on the West Coast and not here. So I got to watch as once great internet companies locally, like Alta Vista and Lycos. See, I'll bet half of you have never even heard of them. Believe it or not, once upon a time, they were as big as companies like Yahoo. They were the Google of their age. They're gone now, or they're so diminished you don't even know about them. I got to watch that happen and document it happen, but I also got to watch the rise of these other companies, the Googles and the other companies that were going to turn this around and revitalize our whole corporate understanding of how the internet was a money-making proposition and a life-changing proposition. But the big life-changing proposition that came next happens in 2007 when I walk into an AT&T store on Boylston Street and I pick up my first iPhone. Do you guys remember that when the then CEO of Microsoft, he's not CEO anymore, and this might explain why, then CEO of Microsoft, Steve Ballmer, saw the iPhone and he said, this is a joke, this is a toy, no big deal, you know? Unbelievable. What was he thinking? What was he smoking? It was just like when I used Mosaic for the first time. I picked up that phone, and the minute I touched it, once again, I knew the world had changed because somebody had finally created a computer you could carry around in your pocket. But no, that wasn't the best of it. The first time you touched an iPhone, you knew not only had they created a computer that you could carry in your pocket, but it was a computer that anybody could use. It was the first computer that actually fulfilled that promise. When you touched it, you knew what to do with it. Anybody ever read the instruction manual for an iPhone? Of course not. You just used it. Nobody had ever before built a computer that you could just use. The minute you touched it, it worked. And I knew instantly that once again the world had changed. Because if you could carry a computer with you everywhere and do all the kinds of work that you might want to do, everyone would do computing wherever it was practical. You wouldn't have to be an expert, you wouldn't have to be a genius, you wouldn't have to master all kinds of arcane technologies, you just whip out of your pocket and start doing it. And so my beat, once again, is transformed by the rise of mobile computing, which once again completely changed what it meant to use digital technology. And right now, you know, it's weird. Here I am 20 years later, and I feel like it's just starting up now. You hear people say sometimes, you ain't seen nothing yet, the internet and all this stuff is just at its beginnings. They are not lying, because we are about to go, at this very moment in history, from having a computer in your pocket to a world in which your pocket is a computer. That is what's about to happen now. Your pocket's a computer, your jacket's a computer, your shoe's a computer, the wall's a computer, the light bulbs are computers. We have figured out, or are on the verge of figuring out, how you put intelligence, data storage, and communication into literally everything that the human race knows how to make. And all these devices connect to each other and talk to each other. We can barely begin to comprehend the possibilities that that has. I mean, it will be possible now for us to learn about the world, to make machines interact with us with such subtlety and efficiency and power that it will make everything that has come before seem trivial by comparison. But it will also raise the most serious and troubling consequences for issues like security and privacy. What happens when your TV set can be hacked and that allows people to get inside, say, your bank account or wipe out your identity? That kind of thing is now a practical possibility because your TV set's on the network now. Your thermostat's on the network now. Your clothes may even be on the network. And every single one of those objects is a vulnerable point where somebody can attack you. And it's also a vulnerable point where some government organization, some corporation, or even some terrorist group or criminal group can infiltrate your life and figure out everything they need to know about you. And nobody's sure how to deal with that. We all saw the story of the hacked Jeep, where somebody was able from 10 miles away to cause somebody's car to malfunction by remote control. And that was done to a car in an industry where people know this is an issue and have been working hard to deal with it, and they were completely caught by surprise. Think about every little item in the world. Every company in the world making something is now having to have computer security experts explain to them how to make those devices safe. I don't think they can do it. It's going to be a total mess, and I can hardly wait. It is going to be so much fun to write about, and you guys are just going to be in for so much trouble. But it's also going to be amazing. So anyway, this is how I've been able, through the years, to maintain my ability to do this for 20 years, because I haven't been doing the same thing. I have been trying to grow, to improve, to enlighten myself with each new thing that I have to do. And I just think that you guys can learn to do the same thing if you follow a few principles that I've tried to follow. One of them is mastery. You have got to read everything you can get your hands on. You've got to study the field constantly. You will never know enough. Above all, talk to people in the field. One of them, I call this the dirty little secret of journalism. I'm always in awe of it. People will tell you what they know. Just ask them. You're surprised by this. You think, oh, nobody will want to talk to me. No, find somebody who knows something, who's a real expert about something. They will be dying to talk to you. Anything you want to know, find a person who knows it and ask them, and they will tell you. Do that in whatever field you're in, and you will never stop learning. Another thing, you need to branch out. I used to just do, of course, journalism, but I've done radio, I do television. It's a way of expanding my ability to reach out to the public. It's a way of giving me more skills in communication. And of course, I've even written a book about the navigation industry and the digitization of navigation called You Are Here, published by Basic Books. Makes a great gift. Buy 2 for the holidays. So that enables me to expand my ability to do what I need to do. And one other thing, you always have to serve your customer. In my case, the reader. I never allow myself to forget something I learned from one of my colleagues many years ago. Your readers always know more than you do. It's true. In my case, it's very true. I always remember that I am writing in a city full of, people at MIT and Harvard and so on. I'm not a scientist. I study this stuff, and I know that I have to be very certain of my facts, do great research, because my readers know more than me. And so I approach them with a respect and a diligence that helps me stay on my toes. So basically, if you guys can apply those kinds of principles to what you do in your career, you can keep going and keep doing this for 5, 10, 20 years. You may not want to. The average American only stays in a typical job for a little less than 5 years, and that might be right for you. But me, I have found that by constantly changing it up, learning more, varying what I'm doing, and keeping up with the industry as it changes, I can keep doing the same thing, and I could be able to do it for the next 20 years and enjoy every minute of it. Thanks a lot.